Viewer discretion is advised. This episode may include themes that some viewers may find disturbing.
Welcome to Two Bitches in a Broom podcast for this week's episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to do something a little bit different this time. We are going to take a deep dive into a true crime case. So, this is a new series that we want to implement and thought it would be fun to do. Not that true crime's fun, but uh, analyzing it uh, from a energetic perspective. So the case that we are going to go into and review and discuss today would be the Sheila LaBar case, the avenging angel, as she so dubs herself. And okay, so you want to go in and talk a little bit about backstory? Because I know you did quite a bit of backstory for her.
Yeah. So I was like a dog with a bone on this.
Yeah.
I love the human mind. I think it's very interesting. I also definitely, I'm a big proponent of shadow work. I think that a lot of what makes us tick in our lives has a lot to do with our childhood,
Mhm.
things that we have experienced. So as soon as I heard about this, I absolutely thought, okay, what was her childhood like? And her sister had testified that she was abused, and she had testified that she was physically and sexually abused by her father and her father's friends and associates. And that was when she was quite young. I have it documented at 8 years old is when it began.
Mm.
Her first place of employment was at a brothel. That's the word that I'm going to use
Mhm.
here, but it was at a brothel, and she was to have been a maid there for a period of time. And there was some speculation that at some point she may have become one of the girls that also serviced men there as well. It was never
Mm.
proven, but it was speculated.
Mhm.
Then after that, mind you, she is still in high school at this time. I want to make this perfectly crystal clear because that's very, 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 very young. Um, then she started writing for the local newspaper. Oh, and I should also say this is in Alabama, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
This is in Alabama. Um, then she started writing for a local newspaper, and it was kind of like a Dear Abby, but it was for people who were looking for love. And she wrote for that local newspaper, and it was quite interesting, some of the things that she was leading people into how to look for love. It was very risque. It was very sexually oriented, and it was very promiscuous would be being very gentle. That would be a very gentle word that we'll use. At the age of 2, she was given the nickname as Firecracker, and I as she matured and she got older, she was dubbed another nickname, but I'll reserve that until Chris gives us a little more story that comes along with it. But she had a rough, really, really tough childhood. It wasn't
Mhm.
fun. It wasn't games. she received, their socioeconomic background was not great. They didn't make a whole lot of money. They weren't in the best of neighborhoods. And I'm going to add some little snippets here of the house that she grew up in, where she worked at, the brothel she worked at, in the newspaper that she worked at, and some clippings because I have some still photography of that, which I thought would be kind of
Nice.
cool and helpful.
Yeah, love that.
And if you,
Yeah.
talk about her, more mature years, that'd be cool.
Yeah. So it was small town and a small town environment, yeah, youngest of 6 kids, troubled, all of that. I feel like that's going to really play a part and impact moving forward in her life. So Sheila LaBar was one that was known widely to use sex to her advantage, use promiscuity to her advantage and manipulation and to get what she wanted in life. Um, her first marriage was when she was 18 or 19. Her first husband, John Baxter, which didn't last very long. So I believe it was they were like married in New Year's Eve, divorced before Valentine's Day kind of thing. But the reports kind of start there when it comes to what her her crime that she went down. So that relationship, he came already from a previous from married before, had a child, and what Sheila would do was when he was at work and she had the child, she would either give it was alcohol or some kind of NyQuil or some kind of sleep aid to the child and then lock her in the closet
Mhm.
so she would be out of the way. Um, and that didn't last very long for her. Once John Baxter found out what was really going on, he dropped her very quickly.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's his child that this is happening to. She went on there to marry another man, so it's her second marriage, to this guy, Ronnie Jennings. They met, he worked in a restaurant, and that's how they met, but it was a very toxic relationship. There's reports of her being abusive to
Mhm.
him. He skedaddled after that.
Mhm.
So that was another short-lived thing. So here's where things start to kind of take a twist as if it's already not twisted enough. Uh, so after that relationship had went down, she overdosed on medication and got into a car accident. But while at the medical center, she fell into a coma. So I believe she was in the coma. And when she recovered, she started saying about how she had died. She died, she went to heaven, had these apparitions and experiences. And according to her, she was sent back to Earth from God on a mission. So coming back as the avenging angel, sent on a divine mission to rid the world of pedophiles. Here's the tie from childhood,
Mhm.
the unhealed trauma from childhood. So after that, she went on to meet Dr. LaBar. So Dr. LaBar was an older gentleman, because mind you, keep in mind,
She had overdosed on prescription medication, got into a
yeah,
car accident, and that
coma,
and
yeah.
that's when she saw it, right?
And that's when she had that experience
Okay.
where yeah.
She was like
So,
coma for, I don't know, I think it was 10 days,
so yeah, something like that.
like a week. Yeah, she was in a coma
Yeah.
for a week, and that's when
hmm
that happened. Okay.
And that's when
I'm
that
sorry, I'm
happened.
trying to keep
Oh yeah, it's a lot.
yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
lot of
Okay.
bouncing right after one another. So after that experience, then she comes across and she meets Dr. LaBar, who is an older gentleman. Because keep in mind, this chick at this point is like 20, 21,
Mhm.
still very young.
Yeah.
So Dr. Labar is an older gentleman, and he is a well-known, established chiropractor in the area. And she meets him by responding to an advertisement in the newspaper, The Looking for Love, which I think is interesting how she used to write for newspapers in that same kind of context. But so she responded to his ad. He's a widower, so he didn't want to be lonely, obviously, who wants to? You want a partner. So she responded to his ad and included nude photos of her to ensure she catches the attention of Dr. Labar. So he's a chiropractor, but he also has a very large property out in the country. He has a horse farm. So he's well established. He's well set up for himself. So they're saying that she kind of adopted this father figure with Dr. Labar. He created the stability, he had the finances, he really just essentially set her up in life. They never legally got married, but she took on his last name as common law. So she looked at herself as the common law wife
Yeah,
for
she
him.
legally changed her name.
Yeah, legally changed her name under the guise of common law,
Yeah.
but they never legally got married.
Mhm.
So what's interesting is she then started to infiltrate herself into his life,
Mhm.
became the manager of his chiropractor office,
Mhm.
uh, drove everyone away. So all of his employees, and this is where the isolation starts to come into play,
Yep.
isolating him from everyone, his personal life, his professional life. And while she's living with him on the farm, running everything at this point,
Mhm.
she meets another man. So there is Wayne, I believe is his name. Let me look at my notes really quick. Yep. So she meets this other man who comes in to do some handiwork at the chiropractor office and ends up moving him into the farm
Mhm.
with the doctor, her, and him. And from this point, it's reported that she starts telling her new man, who she legally marries, by the way,
Mhm.
um, that it's taking a long time for Dr. Labar to die naturally. Something should be done. But this
Mhm.
freaks him out. This freaks this guy out. So he goes and he tells the doctor. And at this point, the doctor's afraid for his life. He's afraid for his own life. And it is reported that the doctor had taken this gentleman, put him on a bus, and sent him on his way to get him out of Dodge.
He
Yeah.
helped him escape.
He helped him escape, get out of here.
Yeah.
Um, and all the while this is going on, Sheila is creating a reputation for herself,
Mhm.
so around town. And she's dresses very provocatively. It's said that she answers the door for packages for delivery trucks wearing next to nothing. So she becomes known as Sheila the Peeler,
Yeah, that's her
which is
nickname. Yeah.
her nickname, Sheila the Peeler, which is said that she garnered that nickname because men would be hoping that they would see a little something, she would flash them. There would be all kinds of, provocative instances that she would engage in and participate in.
Mhm.
So once that happens, in December of 2000, Dr. Labar actually passes. Um, I didn't see where it said if how he passed. I'm sure it was
No,
not.
it wasn't documented. It just says
Yeah,
there's suspicious circumstances.
yes. So suspicious circumstances. There's nothing proven or known or anything of the sort. But keep in mind too, through all of this, she has now has power of attorney
She's
over his
the
affairs.
sole heir.
She's the sole heir. She got everything, like the will, everything is
Mhm.
turned to her favor because he has children from his previous relationship, his
Yep.
former marriage, and everything is now belonging to her. She's in charge of it all. So when he dies, there's literally no structure left in her life. The little structure that she perceived with Dr. LeVar,
Mhm.
um, there's nothing. And she has everything now, all of this stuff. She has the farm, all of his assets and everything. So with this high sex drive of hers, she is going out on the prowl. You know, she's lonely now at home.
Mhm.
She's lonely at home, which is where she comes across and finds James Brackett.
Well,
So,
she was no stranger to the police, though.
oh no,
Were
no.
constantly being
Mm-hmm.
called, and it was, as she was stated, being the peeler. Even the police wouldn't go out there alone. They would have a buddy up
They had to.
system
Yeah.
because they were so concerned with her coming up and accusing them or coming up and being
Right.
good.
Because she would. She was
Yeah,
flirting with the police
yeah.
officer. She was
They
doing,
were like, this chick
yeah,
has a screw loose. There's something going on. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So they would always have to ensure that there's an extra witness present because of this. So she's very familiar with the police department
Yeah.
around town. She had like her reputation is solid
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
comes to this. And
Yeah.
she's doing nothing, by the way, uh to reverse this reputation or to correct it. It's full,
Yeah.
this is who she is.
She was
So,
perceived as having like, she was a little bit of, loose,
mhm,
morally,
yeah,
and lack of better terms, but the law enforcement didn't perceive her as dangerous.
no,
They
no.
perceived her as a little kooky
Yeah, yeah,
and a little loose morally.
yeah.
that that's
It's like
how
when you
they.
know, like, oh yeah, the crazy lady down the street,
Yeah.
like, oh, she's
Yeah.
harmless.
Yeah.
She may be outlandish, but she's harmless,
Yeah.
kind of thing. That is kind of how they treated her and what
Yep.
they took with her.
Exactly.
So they weren't, when you go through and if you look at this case and look at the story behind it, it begs the question. I had the question of why wasn't something else done in the meantime? This is
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
they never really took her for serious
Yeah.
of threats.
Yeah. They're like, oh, she's a little kooky, but
Yeah,
she ain't gonna
she,
hurt.
yeah.
She may take off all of her
Oh,
clothes, but you're gonna be fine.
right. That's it. So she meets this guy, James Brackett. She brings him back to the farm, offering him room and board and food and for in exchange to be a handyman, which of course naturally progressed into a sexual relationship.
Mhm.
And again, here comes the toxic behavior. Here comes the aggression, the abuse. There was one report where the neighbor had saw him running down the road and all beat up and bloody and only said one word, Sheila.
Mhm.
And so it's reported after that. I mean, like, there's even one too where I thought this was like, why didn't you leave immediately? She chases him with an axe into a horse trailer. And that alone, yeah, go, run, friend, run.
She tried to run him over with a
She,
truck.
yeah, oh
She
my gosh,
shot
yeah.
at him at one point.
Oh yeah, over his head.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's extremely toxic
Oh yes,
relationship. But I think
absolutely.
people just thought, these two crazy people,
Hmm.
he's crazy for being with her.
Oh
They
yeah.
deserve each other kind of.
I know.
Yeah.
And think about it too. She already has that reputation. Plus, she already has the reputation of being in multiple relationships and it being like, getting crazy. And
Yeah.
what's the one thing that kind of starts to become people is to start to become complacent? Is it right? No, but people start to become complacent when you're like, oh yeah, like there's always drama with her and not really taking a stand in anything.
Right.
So he manages to get back in touch with his family, and then he gets out the hell out of Dodge. So he's out of the picture. Now she's trolling for a new one. And she meets the next gentleman, Michael Deluge, in a homeless shelter, offers him the same thing, room and board, food, stuff like that. And I mean, homeless shelter, farm, horse farm, room and board. Why that looks really good. Farm looks really good. Um, so he was what is known to people as kind of a lost soul. He was a songwriter, a poet. He did have a family and he had a child, and that fell apart. And when that fell apart, his life kind of spiraled downhill from there, got into drugs, and then ended up in the homeless shelter. So just like James, she offered him the same thing. He takes the offer, and then it turns into, again, develops into a sexual relationship.
Mhm.
And she starts to tell him things about himself and his family. So convincing him that he was abused sexually when he was younger, and he to himself is a pedophile. Um, so it's now becoming apparent that this manipulation and this sexual accusations and things seem to be what arouses her and what entices her in her acts. So um it is there's not from what I've researched, there's not really reports of what happened to him. They just kind of fall off and go to the next guy.
Well, there
Uh,
was a person, a farmhand actually, that did was an eyewitness, that he had bruises on him, he
mhm.
appeared to have been beaten up, and then that same farmhand had later saw Sheila setting fire to a very apparently stained mattress.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because the stuff that I watched and listened to didn't touch on that one. They went right into her
Yeah.
next one, which is the big kicker of what gets a lot of stuff in motion.
Yeah.
So from that situation comes a new gentleman, again, on the prowl again, once more. So now comes in Kenneth County. So
Now, mind you,
he,
2005 was the last time that guy was seen.
yeah,
Right.
that's
That,
it.
that was the last time Michael was seen. Nobody saw
Right,
him after that. He just like vanished.
right.
Then that's
And
when.
then here comes the new, yeah. So now comes in Kenneth County, and he himself comes from somewhat of a broken childhood. He has a learning disability, but he's a very trusting guy. Him and his mom are really close. His mom actually was involved in a car accident when he was younger. She was in a coma herself for 45 days and then in and out of the hospital for years after that, which meant Kenneth was bouncing around from house to house. So that's where his broken childhood comes from. There's no stability on top of that. He wants to get into the military. He finds his way into the military and then ends up finding out right before graduation that he is not going to graduate. So it's really unfortunate and sad that his mom recounts in the one of the episodes that I watched from Film Rise on YouTube that he was directing traffic at the graduation, and that broke him, that shattered him. She said in the interview, she says he was dead inside, and his eyes was just dead from that point. So here is another person coming from a troubled past into Sheila's occupancy now.
And
And
he's 24 years
he
old.
was 24 years old.
And he had
She,
the mentality
yes,
of a 12-year-old.
yes,
And she was more than 20 years older than
than
him.
him. Mm-hmm.
You know, all of his family described him prior to meeting her as being having a very happy, childlike
Yeah.
demeanor, very optimistic, very outgoing. Um,
Yep.
that's important, I think, to kind
Mhm.
of add to this, because a childlike demeanor in my mind is I want to be very pleasing. I want to make
Right.
everybody
He's
happy.
trusting of
Yeah,
everybody, not
yeah.
questioning, as opposed to where we would look at somebody like suspicious or notice these red flags. He's very trusting with individuals. Um, so he finds himself in the web of Miss Sheila. And there is, again, here comes the isolation, the abuse, the same routine is starting to play out again. But this time there's trouble afoot because he's so close with his mom. His mom is not going to let up easy. So I know there was one report where um, there was an instance when they went to Walmart and he was in a wheelchair, and there was calls to the police station to go to Walmart because there's a woman taking pictures and a man in a wheelchair, and it just didn't seem right. Something seemed off. So when the police arrived, he's of age, obviously. He's already past the consenting age, so he's technically an adult. And he's being reported as visually looking wrecked, bruised, slumped over,
Oh, and she
drooling,
was
and
purchasing these
yeah,
big containers that
big
you fill with
containers.
Vaseline.
Yeah,
That's
big
kind of important.
containers. And when the police tried to question him, she interrupted saying, quote, "shut the fuck up,"
Yeah,
unquote,
yeah.
um, and wouldn't let him speak. All he could say was, he's okay. Yes, he's fine. And clearly he's not. Clearly he's not. But their hands are tied. He's an adult.
Mhm.
There's not much that they can do. So his mom, though, is persistent. He used to show up every Sunday for Sunday dinner. He was never late. In fact, he was 45 minutes early. And when he started to not show up, she was on it. She was on the police constantly. She wasn't going to let this go easily. So she would call the police station to have welfare checks done
Mhm.
in the house, for the property, for the
With
house, for
great
him.
regularity.
Yeah, with regularity. And the thing that kind of irks me about that whole thing too is that instead of the police actually going, they call her. They call Sheila
No,
on the
actually,
farm.
Sheila called them to very shortly after their encounter at
Hmm.
Walmart, and she played them a recording in which Kenneth supposedly, which that is public information you can access,
Oh yeah, yeah.
confessed
The
to being a
so
pedophile.
yeah.
And because local police were familiar with Sheila's
Hmm.
erratic behavior, they didn't take that recording seriously,
Yeah.
but they decided to do a welfare check on
Yeah.
Kenneth. And they're like, well, we're just going to do it tomorrow instead of waiting to the end of the week like we normally do. Okay.
Right, right. Oh yeah.
But by that time, it was too late.
Exactly. So it was like you have this mom who's number one, a welfare check, in my mind at least,
Mhm.
an in-person, all of the experiences of knowings of anything that I've ever encountered in my entire life
Yeah.
when it comes to welfare checks is in person. A patrol officer is sent out to the property or the home or the business, wherever, to do
Mhm.
a face-to-face validation. This person is alive and well, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it really was just like, what the hell? You're just calling,
Yeah.
and then she calls you and plays this record. Oh, he left, and he left on his own, and here's why. And then plays the recording. And you can find this recording, all the recordings, there's quite a few, public knowledge. But pretty much, what Charlie was saying, questioning him if the person he identified as his mother ever abused him. And you can hear him saying yes. And then accusing him of being a pedophile, and you can hear him say yes. And then through the recording, what sounds like him vomiting, and then you hear what is also sounds like him passing out, because you hear her say, get the fuck up. You can't fake passing out. And now finally the police at some point, not that instant, but make their way to the house. So here's, what I think is interesting with this is, look at all of this shadow and this trauma that has accumulated, and with this individual who has now turned that into justification for actions now in her later life and what she's doing. So when they finally make their way to the farm to do the check, yeah, they don't have a warrant, so it doesn't really produce anything. They have to come back.
No, when they arrived, she was standing at a large burn pile, and there was a bone, a very large bone with a shoe attached sticking out. And they were told to leave and get off the property because they didn't have a search warrant. They had no choice but to leave. And when they returned,
Yeah.
she had already disposed of most of the evidence at that point.
Yeah. Well, I thought so. It's because I know she wasn't happy that they were there, that they showed up. She was pissed that they showed up.
Expect, again, crazy, gloating lady that always fighting. They didn't expect, murder. That wasn't what they were anticipating. So I don't think any normal, sane person would expect that.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's no fault of the police, but they had to go and get their due diligence. Law was required a search warrant. They came back and
well, I mean, you have to do it the right way by the book, because anything, even that little hiccup, can cause a problem later. In the chain of command, thing. So they go back to her property with a warrant, and the interview with the police officers state that she wasn't there, but they were able to walk around the property, is where they find that barrel, the burn barrel that was still burning. So it was still lit. And they noticed bone fragment. And on the bone fragment, it looks like human flesh still attached to it. So then all bets are off. And now they're finally doing their full-fledged investigation and search through the property. And in the interview with the police officers who were executing the search, they were stating how when they walk into the house, it was in such a decrepit state. It was disastrous, but evidence was everywhere. Blood, they witnessed blood splatter, finding bone fragments throughout the property. Granted, some were mixed in with animal, so they had to decipher what was human and what was animal.
But 100 rabbits inside the residence.
And it was disgusting. How the state of her.
They were just
freely
free.
Yeah. It's like that house legally should be condemned of how just disgusting and torn up it was inside. So when they are investigating and they're doing their search, and mind you, keep in mind, this is 100 acres, this farm, 100 acres to search through. And they are just starting to scratch the surface of their search and already coming up with all of this evidence and all of these things.
Bone fragments, blood spatter in several rooms, the mattress with blood and charred remains, burnt hedge clippers, pruning shears that were burnt, a knife that had been partially melted. I mean, there was lot.
It overwhelming of how much stuff that they found. and they haven't even gone through a quarter of it yet. They
Yeah.
were just getting started.
Yeah.
And so they even went as far as draining a septic tank
Yeah.
and found the driver's license and birth certificate, right?
Yeah.
In the septic tank
Yeah.
that they drained out. Um, that did not belong to Kenny.
No,
It was
it
it
was
was
some random man that
yeah.
went missing. It was her previous boyfriend, Michael
Hmm.
Deluge,
Yeah.
who had not been seen since 2005. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it looks like she attempted to flush it down the toilet, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, if it's in this, and kudos to that birth certificate, because if it lasted in that septic
I
tank,
thought, I'm like, what is that
like,
made out of? Like,
I know, was that laminated? Because
I know. I'm
that was
just like
my
thinking
thought.
to myself, like, what the hell is that made
I
out
was
of?
like, wow, it
Yeah,
lasted in a septic tank.
I
Okay.
know.
So from this point forward, she goes and withdraws a large sum of money from her account, and goes on the run. So while she's on the run, obviously she can't stay away from men. She can't stay away from them. She just
No.
can't. So she comes across another gentleman, and they spend a few days in a hotel room. And I believe she's making her way to Boston uh, to escape her town because she's now being looked at and investigated. Um, Spends a few days in the hotel room with this gentleman, Steve Martell, I believe is his name. But once he sees her profile on the news, he calls authorities and lets them know, oh, shit. I just had relations with this woman for 3 days in a hotel room. Um, and she skedaddles after that as well too. Then she moved on to another man, Kenneth Washington, and who actually moved into his apartment,
Hmm.
um, and traded sexual favors for a roof over her head for room and board. But he ends up seeing her on the news as well, and her mugshot and her profile, and calls the police and reports her then. So in April 2nd of 2006, she's finally arrested. Um, and again, even in the, what I found was interesting, even in the interrogation with the police when they finally arrest her and bring her in, because now uh, she still tries to manipulate and dominate the conversation with
Absolutely.
the police officers,
Absolutely.
flirting. There was one police officer, I didn't write his name down, who was doing the investigation, the interrogation, and he said they started out 3 feet apart. And in conversation, she moved herself, like their knees were almost touching, how close that she moved, flirting, um, just being very honorary with them, and just really just her typical mode, her typical MO. Um, but at this point, they've had enough to at least charge her with the murder of two. Who knows how much she actually had?
Well, I think it should be said too that Michael Deluge's
Hmm.
blood was used as to use as an analysis to the
Hmm.
blood that was found in the home, and there was a match.
Yeah.
And that's how they could say, well, here's his license, here's the birth certificate,
Yes.
here's his blood. He's been missing since 2005.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
charging her for his.
So she was able to get charged with the murder of Kenneth County and Michael Deluge,
Yeah,
even though they didn't have the body or the whereabouts of Michael, like Charlie just said, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that supports. I don't think he left the farm.
well,
Um,
along with the farmhand who said, hey, I
mhm.
saw her beating him up, or I saw him with bruises.
Yep.
Sounds eerily similar to what had happened with Kenneth. And then
Hmm.
I saw her burning this heavily stained mattress, it
Yeah. Oh,
two
yeah.
and two makes
Oh,
four,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So currently, Well, while she was on trial, they had attempted to try the whole not guilty by reason of insanity route, and that was shut down. But she is serving 2 life sentences for the murder of Kenneth County and Michael Deluge. And it is reported that she had told a cellmate in prison that she is glad that the reason of insanity did not fly because she didn't want people to think that she was crazy or that she was insane. So,
Yeah, she actually pled guilty to deluge, though, and
mhm,
claimed insanity
for
to
Kenneth,
Kenneth. And that's what really,
yeah.
there's such
So,
disparity between those.
oh my gosh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And it's interesting on an energetic standpoint when we look at um, just even the influence of outside energy and just how shadow that trauma really just never got it feel like looking at it when I was looking at it was this shadow of her experience in her childhood really started to mold and fester into what I would perceive as like a psychotic break and this delusion of her being the avenging angel. And it's fascinating, I think, if you want to talk a little bit about the even just the part of her being in a coma
yeah.
and having that experience.
So first, let me go back to the coma. Okay, so she had this vision in which she was sitting at this table surrounded by bearded men, and one of which she believed was God.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm sending you back to Earth as this avenging angel because she hadn't completed her life's purpose. He
Mm-hmm.
ordered her to get revenge on the kind of men that took advantage of her throughout her childhood by hunting them down and killing pedophiles. Now, it should be said very clearly that neither of the men that we are
Mm-hmm.
discussing had any proof that they engaged in any pedophilic activities at all. Okay.
Right, right.
Um, and trust me, they had been
And
thoroughly,
nor was there
yeah,
was no evidence to support them themselves being abused either,
correct.
because she
Right.
kept insisting that. So they were, there's
Never.
nothing to
No.
show any of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the psychologist for the prosecutor studied over 8,000 pages of her case file assessment. Spent several hours in person on 3 separate occasions. If you're not familiar with these type of cases, that is very rare. They very rarely do 3 separate interviews. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how this particular assessor wanted to see how she was in all 3 separate settings. In one recording, she admitted that killing Kenneth was a complete accident. She burned the body to hide it to spare his mother. That was what she said in one recording. And another recording that she was with this psychologist, she said, I was forced to kill him because he was terrorizing me. He was torturing and killing my pet rabbits. She was all over the place. Now, if you were to audibly hear these recordings, you can also audibly hear a change in tone in her voice, and you can audibly hear a change in the speech pattern. If you are accustomed to hearing people, like for me, I pause a lot when I speak. I'm sure people want to like put me on fast forward, I pause because I'm very thoughtful with my word choices before I speak, where other people, they may speak very, very quickly. So every time you listen to me, I'm going to be very thoughtful with my speech choices, and that's just who I am as a person. you should not be able to hear me unless I'm like really excited and maybe I got a new car or something like that. You know what I mean? But if it's just normal, engaging conversation, you're not going to see this, drastic change in tone and pitch and pacing of speech, right? So that I found very, very, very interesting. Just from my psychology background, I thought that was very, very interesting. Now, if we go from, can't take the shamanism out of the girl. So if we go through from a shamanic perspective, anytime somebody is in a state of coma, or they are having a medical procedure done where you are in a stasis, essentially, where you are not completely grounded in your body. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making the way I'm describing it. There is absolutely an opportunity for you to become disengaged with the body. And when you become disengaged with the body, it gives an opportunity for energies, outside energies, to impress upon that soul. That's the terminology I'm going to use, to impress upon that soul other things. So I believe that's what she personally experienced. So this is not possession. Possession would be where somebody is taking over that body. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying outside energies were influencing her thought processes, and telling her to do things, or maybe encouraging her to do things. And I think some people could, depending on various states of intelligence, could perceive that to be, oh, that must be God, especially somebody who had so much trauma in their background, severe trauma. And long term. That was constantly being triggered.
Right. Well, I mean, if you look
that
at
was
it,
her only thing that she knew how to utilize. Oh, I know how to get my way. I can get what I want by using the physical form to get what I want. And that was her go-to. That was her only go-to.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when I look at that, of how fascinating that is, even just in the instance of having the coma and then having that that experience. If you're coming from a background like that, where really there's that abuse, there's that lack of validation and want to be wanted and be special and important to serve a higher purpose, somebody in that state, in that mindset, you have that experience, and what you're perceiving as God to be directing you. Wow, how special and righteous can you feel, and right that you're going into that experience, you're coming back with that. I feel like she took that on, and as I'm just looking at this on an energetic level, and what I'm perceiving is you're taking that on as, this is your mission, and you are special, sent from God to serve out this justice, because you've dealt with the injustice of what has been done to you. And it doesn't sound like, and I don't know if you came across anything, but I didn't find anything where
I
the
think it's
abuse she
very
suffered.
reminiscent of Eileen Wuornos, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I
true,
think it's
true.
very reminiscent of that. And not the whole case, but different,
There's these specific like signatures throughout each history, and you know, especially when I didn't find anything that shows that what she endured as a child ever came to anything. It was just this was her experience, like, swept under the rug, move on with life.
Mhm.
Um, Definitely no accountability, no therapy,
Yeah,
no counseling, no nothing.
sure.
Um, so I think that's as I was looking at her and going through the case and the progression of it, I found it really interesting too, especially when the coma part hit of wow, looking at that aura so damaged, so
Oh,
tarnished,
yeah.
so gaping
Oh, yeah.
in openings. It's
Yeah.
gaping and I agree with the abs I absolutely agree with influenced by outside energies,
Absolutely.
using that unhealed shadow to impress upon even more
Sure.
with her, feeling so righteous in her path
Yeah.
and the power that she felt, um, you know, by that manipulation, utilizing again sex, you know, uh, the physical body, how she looked. From all things that I've seen, she was in her younger years, especially, a very attractive
Mhm.
looking female and used that to her advantage.
Yeah, I think in her formative years,
Hmm.
you know, she it it was quoted by many people that she was quoted as being very curvaceous, is
Hmm.
how she was
Yeah.
described in court transcripts, very
Hmm.
curvaceous and beautiful, and but she was always described in a sexual manner. She was
Yes.
never described like she was kind or ornery. There was no like the person was never, it was always physical.
Hmm.
Nobody described her as the core of the person. And I found that to be rather sad in all the descriptions.
Yeah.
I was like going through trying to, I'm like, really? Nobody? There, literally, somebody tell me about this woman. And I still don't know anything more about her as a person written contextually from what I've read.
Yeah.
Uh,
No.
other than her physicality, her
Yeah.
sexuality, which is sad. That's so sad.
Yeah. There wasn't, it was everything was sexualized. All the reports, all the witnesses. I mean, I think I only came across a short blip of an instance of some witnesses or townspeople not wanting to deal with her because she's aggressive. Um, but that was it. Everything else was just everything was completely sexualized. And I feel like even when it came to her experience as in this little short blip of just, oh, she's just aggressive. Well, that's still, there's so much history and backing behind that, but I don't feel like there was never an opportunity
Yeah,
for
I mean,
that to come
she
through.
ran, this her, you know, common law
Hmm.
husband's practice. She had to have engaged with a lot of people, and it's a profession. So,
Yep.
on a professional level, she had to have engaged with a lot of people, and there's no commentary on who she was as an individual.
Hmm.
And I found that to be very uncomfortable. That's what I found that. I found that to be very uncomfortable uh
Yeah.
for a human being to not have, you know, I mean, at some point there has to be more than sexualization.
Yeah.
Um, so in no way, I want to make this crystal clear. In no way am I saying she gets off scot-free
Oh
because
no.
She
Yeah.
was impressed upon by outside influences. Absolutely not. We are doing episodes like this, and we're hoping to do like one of these a month
Hmm.
from this point on, because I think it's important for us to know how outside energies can influence our behavior and how shadow work is an important part of any metaphysical path, because things that left unchecked, they control us. They have power over us.
Hmm.
Knowledge is power. But by no means am I saying this gives her a free pass. Absolutely not. My heart goes out to the families of all of her victims, because I promise you, there is so many more than are stated here. I have no proof of that.
Absolutely.
It's a knowing I have within
It's,
myself.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's a
I
knowing
have,
that I have.
yeah.
There's many family members that have been touched by her horrific crimes. Um, but yeah, this is a nobody really in the metaphysical community, we don't really discuss stuff like this. It's too taboo, you know.
Hmm. Right, right.
Um, and I think we need to discuss it. Does this have a space? Does it hold water within the judicial system? Absolutely not. It does not. You will get laughed right out. I am completely aware of that. I'm hopeful at one point in time, people may, who knows?
Hmm.
It may, it may be considered. Right now, it is not.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see where we evolve into, but I think, again, this is a horrific crime. I too feel, as I was looking through the case and like reading through, even though she was only charged with two, I feel to be true that there's more. No proof of that. It's just what I'm picking up as I'm looking at this. And it does not, outside energy influences absolutely does not take away from what she still chose to do. But I just think it's interesting how energy plays a part, and shadow work plays such a part in how you evolve on your path. And this is, and I we're not saying that just because you hold unchecked shadow or unhealed shadow that you're going to turn into this.
Mhm.
That's not at all what that is either. But I
I
feel
am
like this is,
really concerned with anybody who she has
yeah.
contact with.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
serious. I am really concerned with any human beings that she has any contact with. I
Oh
feel
yeah.
genuine concern with that.
Well,
Gen-
it's like, it's it's fascinating to me just how it's the perceived sense of power.
yeah.
This unhealed shadow and trauma that she's carrying has, in her perspective, has shifted into this illusion of power. And that is exactly where the point that you're making of being concerned of anybody that has contact with her, because that it can be severely harmful
Yeah.
to other people around, Um, and even just looking at just the energy, the aura, the state of that frequency of that individual, absolutely is prime for influence of outside energies.
I think you also have to look at her chosen pet. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm looking at it from a psychological standpoint, right? But I'm also looking at it from a metaphysical standpoint. There's so many different, ways that I'm kind of looking at. It's a rabbit. What do rabbits do? When we're looking at the energy of the
Hmm.
rabbit from a shamanic standpoint, reproduction.
Yep.
we can't look at a more sexualized energy in the
Mm-hmm.
animal kingdom. We cannot.
Mm-hmm.
Not. I mean,
Yeah.
it's literally used for, uh, you know, Easter as that rebirth. Think about that for a
Oh yeah,
minute,
that's right.
you know.
That is right. And I mean, like, it's even quote, like, even in sexual conversations, it's quoted, rabbit is used.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
like rabbits, like all, kind of thing.
like
And she's drawn to
there's
that energy.
over 100 roaming free. I mean, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the mental state she was in, the actual energy consumption that she was in, the absolute state of chaos that she was living in. I'm going to add some still pictures in this as
Yeah.
well of the because I had some from the crime scene.
Yeah.
Nothing gory, but just so they get an idea of like what that looked like. That was insanity, you
Mm-hmm.
know? But yeah, I think uh I think it's good conversation. I don't believe in judging anybody, right? I don't
Right.
judge anybody. It's not my place to judge a thing. I think it's good food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very good food for thought. Do you think she was insane? I'll leave that up to the viewers. Do you think she
Right.
was insane? Do you think that she was energetically compromised? I've made it very clear in my opinion. I absolutely believe she was energetically compromised. But do you? Explore
Mm-hmm.
that within yourself. Do you think that that is a possibility? And have you ever contemplated that before?
Mm-hmm.
And is there other cases that now you're considering that that may have happened? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good food for thought.
Oh yeah. I feel like it's really a great conversation to and topics to ponder when we are moving into this state where we are as a collective starting to recognize and understand the correlation between walking your path and energetic state, right?
Mhm.
Mind, body, and soul energy, your energetic field, your aura, all of this. More and more people are becoming aware,
Mhm.
practitioner or non-practitioner, of the direct connection between all of it. So I feel like true crime is also plays a part in that, also has a space in that when you think about that. We all always like to think about the nice fluffy stuff, right?
Yeah.
The alignment, the this, the that, like raising the vibration, but there's also the flip side to it. And I feel like this shows part of that.
In everything I researched, I did not see that she disclosed to any family, any friends, anything that she had this vision. Did you read that?
No, there was no everything that I researched and did not say anything of her sharing information with anyone. It actually, you know what? It didn't even speak of any experiences of her communicating with any family members, of having any outside relations other
Yeah.
than the men.
Yeah, I really wish I could get my hands on the
Yeah.
medical records of that coma because I was in my own mind, I was thinking, did she tell anybody about her experiences?
Mhm.
Of like, oh, I was just in this state and I just experienced this. And did anybody tell her you just took massive doses and that was a complete fallacy?
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, there's no reports on that.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering if there was any input if she ever disclosed it. Did anybody ever tell her otherwise? But I never found any record.
Yeah, I didn't find anything either. And it would be interesting to know too. I mean, you got to think at that young age to have that experience in a coma. Well, who was there at the hospital with her?
Yeah,
Who showed up? She's the youngest of 6 children.
I could not find anything. And I was like,
Did somebody?
I know, I
Yeah.
couldn't find anything.
And there's nothing on the reports that I've seen.
Yeah,
So I think it's an interesting thing to look at. It's a different perspective to consider
mhm.
when it comes to true crime and these acts of, like you just said, the great food for thought, something to consider. Not saying that she should get off or it's excusable. Absolutely not.
No,
Choices were made,
yeah,
ripple effects out of choice. Said choice is
yeah,
this. But it is a different perspective to consider. I will say that.
yeah. So leave your opinions, leave your comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear if you enjoy this type of content. Again,
Mhm.
we're considering doing this like once a month. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Oh, yes.
I think it's good food for thought. It's good contemplation, and it's good for us to be aware of, you know, the energies that we surround ourselves with. That's what feeds us mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Mhm.
Think about where you're at right now. What are you feeding yourself?
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
All right. Well, this was fun. I like it because I'm a huge true crime nerd
yeah.
fan.
It was fun. Yeah.
So cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this week's episode. Whether you're listening to us audibly or watching us on YouTube, we appreciate your presence. If you found this interesting, but please let us know if this is something that you want to hear more of or like the content or whatever. Like Charlie said, we would like to do this more often. And if you found this episode interesting or you know somebody that would, we always appreciate the energetic exchange of liking, sharing, reviewing, or leaving us a review. Obviously, 5 stars is always preferable, but we'd appreciate whatever. So until next time.
Bye-bye.
Yes, bye bye.